I'm Jessica Martinez, 31 years old, and I work as a senior software engineer here in Austin, Texas. 6 months ago, I made a decision that would forever change my relationship with my family. I canceled their vacation tickets while they were literally walking through airport security, heading to what they believed would be their dream Christmas getaway to Cancun. The aftermath was explosive, devastating, and ultimately liberating, in ways I never imagined possible. But before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The story I'm about to share isn't just about money or vacations. It's about what happens when you've been designated as the family bank account without your consent, when your success becomes everyone else's expectation, and when saying no feels like betraying everything you were raised to believe about love and loyalty. It's about the moment I realized that being financially responsible for myself didn't automatically make me financially responsible for everyone who shared my last name. Growing up in a Mexican-American household in Cedar Park, just outside Austin, family was everything. My grandmother Rosa always said that blood runs thicker than water, and that when one of us succeeds, we all succeed. She came to Texas with nothing but determination and the clothes on her back, working multiple jobs to give her children opportunities she never had. My parents, Patricia and Robert Martinez, inherited that same work ethic and passed it down to me and my older sister Amanda. My father spent 37 years working for the Postal Service, waking up at 4 a.m. 6 days a week to sort mail before his delivery route. My mother worked as a teacher's aide at the local elementary school, supplementing our income with evening house cleaning jobs that often kept her out until 9 or 10 at night. They sacrificed constantly, driving cars until they literally couldn't run anymore, shopping at thrift stores, and turning family dinners into creative exercises in stretching ground beef and rice into meals for 4. Amanda and I learned early that money was tight and dreams were luxuries. While other kids in our neighborhood took piano lessons or joined expensive sports teams, we entertained ourselves with library books and backyard games that cost nothing but imagination. Our annual family vacation consisted of driving 3 hours to visit relatives in San Antonio, sleeping on air mattresses in my aunt's living room, and treating dinner at Whataburger like a special occasion. Despite the financial constraints, or perhaps because of them, I developed an early fascination with computers and technology. When I was 12, I saved birthday and chore money for 6 months to buy a used laptop from a garage sale. The thing barely worked, but it opened up a world of possibilities that felt limitless compared to our everyday reality. I taught myself basic programming from library books and free online tutorials, staying up late into the night writing simple codes and dreaming of the day I could build something important. Amanda took a different path. She was always the social one, the charmer who could make friends with anyone and light up a room with her smile. She excelled in school but was more interested in people than academics, dating steadily from the age of 15 and talking constantly about her future wedding and the babies she couldn't wait to have. While I was hunched over my computer learning Java, she was planning her ideal family life with the certainty of someone who had never doubted that her dreams would come true exactly as she imagined them. By high school, our differences had crystallized into distinct roles. I was the serious one, the achiever, the daughter who brought home straight A's and scholarship applications. Amanda was the heart of the family, the one who remembered everyone's birthdays and organized surprise parties and made sure holidays felt magical even when money was tight. Our parents loved us equally, but in different ways. They worried about me, wondering if I spent too much time alone with my computers and not enough time developing social skills. They celebrated Amanda, delighting in her easy laugh and natural ability to make others feel special. When I graduated valedictorian and earned a full scholarship to the University of Texas, my family was proud, but not entirely surprised. They had watched me work toward this goal with single-minded determination for years. When Amanda graduated, 6 months pregnant and married to Kevin Thompson, a boy she had met during senior year, they were equally supportive, helping plan a small wedding and converting the garage into a temporary apartment for the young couple. College was my liberation. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who understood my passion for technology and didn't think it was weird that I preferred debugging code to gossiping about relationships. I discovered that my background in stretching limited. Resources had given me an advantage in problem solving that many of my more privileged classmates lacked. While they threw expensive parties and bought the latest gadgets without thinking, I worked part-time jobs and applied for every scholarship available, graduating debt-free with a degree in computer science and job offers from 3 different tech companies. I chose a startup in Austin because it allowed me to stay close to family while building my career in a city known for its thriving tech scene. The company, called Innovate AI, was developing machine learning solutions for small businesses, and they offered me a starting salary that felt like winning the lottery. $48,000 a year was more money than my parents had ever dreamed of making, and I was 22 years old with room to grow. Amanda, meanwhile, was struggling. Kevin had dropped out of community college when their first baby, Tyler, was born, taking a job at a local electronics store that barely covered their expenses. They had moved out of my parents' garage and into a cramped apartment across town, but money was constantly tight. When Chloe was born 2 years later, followed by Mason 3 years after that, their financial situation became increasingly desperate. Kevin switched jobs frequently, always chasing better opportunities that never seemed to materialize, while Amanda stayed home with the children because childcare costs would have eaten up any wages she could earn. During this time, my career was flourishing. I threw myself into work with the same intensity I had once devoted to learning programming, staying late to tackle complex problems and volunteering for challenging projects that others avoided. My dedication paid off with rapid promotions and salary increases that kept pace with Austin's booming tech economy. By my 25th birthday, I was making $65,000 a year and had been promoted to senior engineer. By 28, I was earning $78,000 plus performance bonuses that often added another $10,000 to $15,000 to my annual income. With my increasing financial stability came increasing family expectations. It started small and seemed reasonable. When Tyler needed school supplies and Amanda's budget was already stretched thin, I bought him a new backpack and notebooks without thinking twice. When my parents' car broke down and they couldn't afford the repair bill, I quietly covered the cost because I remembered all the sacrifices they had made for my education. When Chloe wanted to join her school's soccer team, but the registration fee was beyond Amanda's reach, I paid it gladly, wanting my niece to have opportunities I had never had. These individual acts of generosity felt natural and right. I had been blessed with financial success, and sharing that blessing with family seemed like the most obvious expression of love and gratitude. My grandmother Rosa would pat my hand and tell me I was a good daughter, that God rewards those who take care of their families. My parents beamed with pride when I picked up restaurant tabs or bought Christmas presents that they couldn't afford. Amanda would hug me and tell her friends how lucky she was to have such a generous sister. But somewhere along the way, generosity became expectation. The requests grew more frequent and more substantial. Amanda started calling whenever an unexpected expense arose, whether it was a medical bill that insurance didn't cover, or a security deposit for a new apartment when their landlord raised the rent. My parents began asking for help with their mortgage payments when my father's hours were cut at the post office. Kevin, who had initially seemed embarrassed by my financial assistance, started suggesting ways I could help them save money, like paying for their family's cell phone plan or covering the kids' extracurricular activities. What bothered me wasn't the amount of money, though it was adding up to several $1,000s a year. What bothered me was the assumption that my income belonged to all of us, that my success was a family resource rather than a personal achievement. When I treated myself to a nice dinner or bought new clothes for work, I started feeling guilty, as if I was being selfish with money that could be helping my family. When I mentioned wanting to buy my own place instead of renting, Amanda asked, why I needed so much space when I was single, and suggested I could help them with a down payment instead. The tipping point came last September, during one of our regular Sunday dinners at my parents' house. We were gathered around the kitchen, table eating my mother's enchiladas when Amanda brought up an idea that had been percolating in her mind for months. She had been reading travel blogs and watching vacation videos on YouTube, dreaming of the day when her family could afford to take a real vacation instead of the camping trips and day visits to local attractions that comprised their current travel budget. Amanda had discovered that Christmas week was actually an affordable time to visit Cancun, despite being peak season, because many resorts offered package deals for families willing to book early and commit to all-inclusive stays. She had researched flights, accommodations, and activities, presenting her findings with the thoroughness of a business proposal. The total cost for her family of 5 would be approximately $8,000, including flights, resort fees, meals, and spending money for souvenirs and excursions. As she talked, her excitement was infectious. She described swimming with dolphins, building sandcastles with the kids, and experiencing the kind of luxury vacation that had always seemed impossibly out of reach. Kevin added details about the resort's amenities, mentioning the kids' club and spa services with the enthusiasm of someone who desperately needed a break from financial stress. Tyler, Chloe, and Mason listened with wide eyes, already imagining themselves splashing in ocean waves and eating all the ice cream they wanted. The presentation felt carefully orchestrated, designed to build excitement and momentum before arriving at the end. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Inevitable request. Amanda didn't ask directly at first. Instead, she wondered aloud whether it might be possible, whether they could somehow make it work, whether this might be the year they could finally give their children the magical Christmas vacation they deserved. She mentioned that my parents had never seen the ocean, that my grandmother Rosa was getting older and might not have many more opportunities for family adventures. When no immediate solution materialized, Amanda shifted tactics. She began talking about family unity and shared experiences, about how vacation memories were the gifts that kept giving long after material presents were forgotten. She pointed out that I worked so hard and deserved a vacation too, suggesting that we could all travel together and split the costs in a way that would be fair for everyone. The math was simple and unavoidable. Amanda's family couldn't afford their portion of the trip. My parents, living on my father's pension and my mother's modest teacher's aide salary, certainly couldn't contribute meaningfully to vacation expenses. If this family Christmas vacation was going to happen, it would happen because I made it happen, financially speaking. My initial reaction was practical rather than emotional. $8,000 was a significant expense, but it wasn't beyond my means. I had been saving aggressively since college, building an emergency fund and contributing to retirement accounts with the discipline my parents had instilled in me. My recent promotion had come with a substantial raise, and my bonus potential for the year was tracking higher than usual. I could afford to pay for the vacation without going into debt or seriously compromising my financial goals. But something about the assumption bothered me deeply. Nobody had asked if I wanted to go to Cancun. Nobody had inquired about my holiday plans or whether I had other priorities for my vacation time and discretionary income. The discussion had proceeded from Amanda's desire for a family vacation directly to my obligation to fund it, with my consent treated as an inevitable formality rather than a meaningful choice. I asked for time to think about it, promising to give them an answer within a week. This request for a few days to consider an $8,000 expenditure seemed to surprise everyone, as if my hesitation was evidence of selfishness rather than basic financial prudence. Amanda's face fell slightly, and I could see the disappointment she was trying to hide. Kevin looked confused, as if he couldn't understand why anyone would need to think about such an obvious decision. My parents exchanged glances that I couldn't quite interpret, but their silence felt heavy with expectation. Over the following days, I found myself wrestling with emotions I couldn't easily categorize. part of me genuinely wanted to provide this experience for my family. I loved my nieces and nephew deeply, and the thought of seeing their faces light up as they experienced the ocean for the first time was genuinely appealing. I also recognized that my parents had sacrificed enormously for my success, and paying for a family vacation felt like a small way to acknowledge that debt. But another part of me resented the assumption that my financial success automatically translated into financial responsibility for everyone else's dreams and desires. I had worked incredibly hard to reach this level of professional achievement and financial stability. I had spent countless nights studying while my friends partied, accepted difficult assignments that others avoided, and lived below my means even as my income increased. My financial security was the result of deliberate choices and sustained effort, not luck or accident. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this vacation request represented something larger and more troubling than a simple ask for financial help. It reflected a fundamental assumption about my role in the family that had evolved gradually but significantly over the years. Somewhere along the way, I had become not just Jessica, the daughter and sister, but Jessica, the family safety net, Jessica, the emergency fund, Jessica, whose resources existed primarily to solve problems and fulfill wishes that others couldn't afford. I tried to imagine what would happen if I said no. Would Amanda understand my perspective and accept my decision gracefully? Would my parents support my right to prioritize my own financial goals? Would the family be able to discuss alternatives without making me feel guilty for disappointing everyone? The more I considered these scenarios, the more I doubted that a simple no would be accepted without significant emotional consequences. But I also tried to imagine what would happen if I said yes. Would this be the last vacation request, or would it establish a precedent for future family travels? Would other major expenses follow, justified by the reasoning that I could afford them and they would benefit people I loved? At what point would my financial contributions to family expenses become so routine that they were expected rather than appreciated? These questions haunted me as I went through my daily routines, attending meetings at work and trying to focus on code reviews, while my mind churned through family dynamics and financial ethics. I found myself paying attention to conversations with colleagues about their families, wondering if other successful people dealt with similar expectations or if my situation was unusual. During lunch with my friend and colleague Marcus, I cautiously brought up the subject of family financial expectations without revealing specific details. Marcus, who came from a large African American family in Houston, immediately understood the dynamic I was describing. He shared his own experiences with family members who assumed his engineering salary made him responsible for various expenses, from car repairs to college tuition for younger cousins. Marcus had developed a system for handling these requests that involved setting annual limits on family financial assistance and communicating those boundaries clearly at the beginning of each year. He explained that the initial conversations had been difficult and sometimes hurtful, but that establishing clear expectations had ultimately improved his relationships with family members by removing the uncertainty and resentment that came with constant financial negotiations. This conversation gave me a framework for thinking about my own situation differently. Instead of viewing each request as an isolated decision, I could consider the broader pattern and establish guidelines that would work for everyone involved. Instead of saying yes or no to the Cancun vacation based solely on my immediate feelings about that specific trip, I could use this moment to clarify my ongoing role in family finances. Armed with this perspective, I called Amanda and asked if we could meet for coffee to discuss the vacation idea in more detail. We arranged to meet at Central Perk Cafe, a quiet spot near my office where we could talk without interruption. I spent the drive there rehearsing different ways to express my concerns without sounding selfish or ungrateful for the family relationships that had shaped and supported me throughout my life. Amanda arrived at the cafe with visible excitement, carrying a folder full of vacation research and printouts from travel websites. She had clearly spent considerable time and energy developing detailed plans for the Cancun trip, researching everything from flight schedules to restaurant recommendations. Her enthusiasm was genuine and infectious, and I found myself temporarily caught up in her vision of our family laughing together on tropical beaches. But as she spread brochures across our small table and walked through her carefully planned itinerary, I realized that she had moved far beyond the initial idea stage. In her mind, this vacation was already decided, already booked, already happening. My role was simply to confirm the financial commitment that would turn her detailed plans into reality. The assumption of my agreement was so complete that she had already begun telling the children about specific activities they would experience in Cancun. This presumption crystallized my understanding of the larger problem. Amanda wasn't asking me to help make a family vacation possible. She was informing me of vacation plans that required my financial participation and assuming that I would comply because the alternative would mean disappointing children and breaking promises that had already been made on my behalf. I took a deep breath and began to explain my perspective, trying to balance honesty with sensitivity to her feelings and financial situation. I acknowledged how much thought and effort she had put into planning the trip and expressed genuine appreciation for her desire to create special memories for our family. I also tried to help her understand my concern about the pattern of financial expectations that had developed over the years and my need to establish clearer boundaries around family financial assistance. Amanda's reaction was immediate and intense. Her excitement shifted to confusion, then to hurt, and finally to anger as she realized that I wasn't automatically agreeing to fund the vacation she had been planning for months. She accused me of being selfish and forgetting where I came from, of acting like my success made me better than the rest of the family. She pointed out all the sacrifices our parents had made for my education and suggested that paying for one family vacation was a small way to show my gratitude. The conversation deteriorated quickly from there, with Amanda alternating between guilt trips and accusations, appeals to family loyalty, and threats about what my refusal would mean for family relationships. She mentioned how disappointed the children would be, how embarrassed she would feel having to explain to them why their Christmas vacation plans had fallen through. She suggested that my hesitation revealed something fundamental about my character and my commitment to family values. I left the cafe feeling emotionally drained and more confused than ever about the right path forward. Amanda's reaction had confirmed my fears about how my family would respond to financial boundaries, but it had also highlighted the genuine emotional stakes involved in my decision. These weren't abstract principles we were debating. Real people, including children I loved deeply, would be affected by whatever choice I made. That evening, I called my best friend Rachel, who had known me since college and understood both my family dynamics and my personal values. Rachel listened patiently as I recounted the entire situation, from the initial vacation request through my difficult conversation with Amanda. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment before offering her perspective. Rachel pointed out that my family's financial expectations had evolved gradually over the years, making it difficult for anyone to recognize how dramatically my role had shifted from occasional helper to primary funding source. She also observed that Amanda's reaction to my concerns suggested that this pattern was unlikely to change voluntarily, and that establishing boundaries would require more deliberate action than simply expressing my discomfort. But Rachel also challenged me to consider whether my resistance to funding the vacation was based on legitimate concerns about family financial dynamics, or whether it was rooted in deeper resentments about always being cast in the role of the responsible one. She asked if I was using this situation to work through frustrations that had little to do with vacation expenses and everything to do with feeling taken for granted by people I loved. This question forced me to examine my motivations more honestly than I had been willing to do previously. Part of my reluctance to fund the Cancun trip was indeed about money and boundaries and sustainable family financial relationships. But part of it was also about feeling invisible except when my bank account was needed, about being valued primarily for my economic contributions rather than my other qualities and relationships. I realized that my decision about the vacation couldn't be separated from my broader feelings about my place in the family and my desire to be seen and appreciated as a whole person rather than just a resource to be tapped when financial needs arose. This insight didn't necessarily clarify what choice I should make, but it helped me understand the emotional complexity of the situation more clearly. Over the next few days, I found myself paying closer attention to family interactions and dynamics, looking for evidence that would either support or challenge my growing concerns about financial expectations. I noticed how conversations often steered toward my work and income, how my opinions on non-financial topics seemed to carry less weight than my ability to solve financial problems. I observed how family gatherings were structured around my availability and my contributions, rather than around mutual interests or shared activities that everyone could participate in equally. These observations reinforced my sense that something fundamental had shifted in my family relationships without anyone explicitly acknowledging or discussing the change. I had become the family bank, the emergency fund, the solution to financial problems, and this role had gradually overshadowed other aspects of my identity as a daughter, sister, and individual. But I also noticed moments of genuine love and connection that had nothing to do with money or financial support. My mother asking about my work projects not because she wanted something, but because she was genuinely proud of my achievements. My father sharing stories about his postal route and the people he had met over the years, treating me as an adult worthy of his confidence and perspective. Tyler showing me a school project he was working on and asking for help with research, valuing my knowledge and attention rather than my wallet. These positive interactions reminded me that my family relationships contained much more than financial dynamics, even if those dynamics had become problematic. Whatever decision I made about the Cancun vacation would need to account for the full complexity of these relationships and my genuine love for people who had shaped my life in profound and lasting ways. As the week deadline I had requested approached, I realized that I needed professional guidance to sort through the emotional and practical considerations involved in my decision. I made an appointment with Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a therapist who specialized in family dynamics and boundary setting, hoping that an objective perspective might help me find a path forward that honored both my own needs and my family relationships. Dr. Jennifer Walsh's office was located in a converted Victorian house near downtown Austin, with soft lighting and comfortable furniture that immediately put me at ease. During our first session, I found myself telling the complete story of my family's financial expectations, starting with small requests for school supplies and building up to the current vacation situation. Dr. Walsh listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions that helped me articulate feelings I had been struggling to understand. She explained that what I was experiencing was common among high-achieving individuals from working-class families, particularly in cultures that emphasized collective responsibility over individual success. The transition from family member to family resource often happened gradually, making it difficult for anyone involved to recognize when healthy interdependence had shifted into unhealthy dependency. Dr. Walsh helped me understand that my discomfort wasn't about being unwilling to help family, but about the loss of choice and agency in how my resources were used. She pointed out that healthy family financial assistance involved mutual respect, clear communication, and acknowledgement of the giver's autonomy. What I was experiencing lacked these elements, instead operating on assumptions and expectations that had never been explicitly discussed or agreed upon. During our second session, we explored the cultural dimensions of my situation. Dr. Walsh acknowledged that challenging family financial expectations could feel like betraying deeply held values about loyalty and collective responsibility. She helped me understand that setting boundaries wasn't about rejecting my cultural heritage, but about finding sustainable ways to honor family relationships while maintaining my own financial autonomy and emotional well-being. We developed strategies for communicating my concerns to my family in ways that acknowledged their feelings while clearly expressing my own needs. Dr. Walsh emphasized the importance of being consistent and firm while remaining compassionate, recognizing that my family's reaction might be intense initially, but could lead to healthier dynamics over time. Armed with this professional guidance and a clearer understanding of my own motivations, I decided to have another conversation with Amanda, this time approaching the situation with more confidence and clarity. I called her and suggested we meet, again explaining that I had given considerable thought to the vacation request and wanted to discuss it thoroughly. We met at a different cafe this time, one that felt more neutral and less charged with the emotions from our previous conversation. Amanda arrived looking cautious and slightly defensive, clearly uncertain about what to expect from this follow-up discussion. I could see the tension in her shoulders and the way she avoided direct eye contact as we settled into our seats. I began by acknowledging how much the vacation meant to her and expressing genuine appreciation for her desire to create special experiences for her children and our parents. I told her that I understood the financial pressures she was facing and that I didn't want my response to be interpreted as a lack of love or concern for our family's happiness. But I also explained that I needed to establish clearer boundaries around family financial assistance, not because I wanted to help less, but because I wanted our relationships to remain healthy and sustainable over the long term. I shared my observation that financial expectations had gradually increased over the years, and that I was concerned about the pattern this created for everyone involved. Amanda's initial response was defensive, but she listened more carefully this time as I explained my perspective. I told her about my conversations with Dr. Walsh and what I had learned about healthy family financial dynamics. I emphasized that my concerns weren't about this specific vacation, but about the broader pattern of assumptions and expectations that had developed around my income. I proposed a different approach to family financial assistance that would involve setting an annual budget for family contributions and discussing major requests in advance rather than assuming my agreement. I suggested that this framework would actually make it easier for me to help when genuinely needed, because it would remove the uncertainty and resentment that came with constant financial negotiations. Amanda struggled to understand why I felt the need to formalize what had previously been informal family support. She pointed out that families should be able to count on each other without contracts or conditions, and that my proposed boundaries felt cold and calculating rather than loving and generous. She worried that establishing formal limits would change the fundamental nature of our family relationships. I tried to help her understand that the current informal system wasn't working for me, and that without changes, I was likely to become increasingly resentful and less generous over time. I explained that boundaries weren't about limiting my love for the family, but about creating sustainable ways to express that love without compromising my own financial security and emotional well-being. The conversation was difficult and emotionally charged, but it felt more productive than our previous discussion. Amanda didn't immediately accept my perspective, but she seemed to understand that my concerns were genuine and that I wasn't simply trying to avoid financial responsibility. We agreed to continue thinking about different approaches and to involve our parents in future discussions about family financial dynamics. Over the following weeks, word of my hesitation about funding the vacation spread through the family network. My mother called several times, initially to check on my well-being and then to express her concerns about family unity. She reminded me of all the sacrifices she and my father had made for my education and success, suggesting that helping with one family vacation was a small way to show appreciation for their support. These conversations with my mother were particularly painful because I could hear the genuine hurt in her voice. She didn't understand why I was making such a big deal about money when I had more than enough to afford the vacation. She worried that my professional success was changing me in ways that distanced me from family values and relationships. My father's approach was different but equally challenging. He called one evening and spent most of the conversation talking about his recent retirement and how strange it felt to have so much time but so little money to enjoy it. He mentioned how much he was looking forward to the possibility of seeing the ocean for the first time and experiencing the kind of luxury vacation that had always been beyond their reach. These indirect approaches were in some ways more difficult to navigate than direct requests, because they required me to either ignore the subtext or explicitly address implications that hadn't been stated outright. I found myself feeling guilty for not immediately agreeing to fund something that would clearly bring joy to people I loved, while simultaneously feeling manipulated by conversations that seemed designed to make me feel obligated rather than genuinely invited to participate. Kevin's involvement added another layer of complexity to the situation. During a family dinner, he made several comments about the differences between people who had children and people who didn't, suggesting that childless individuals couldn't really understand the importance of creating special memories and experiences for kids. His tone was casual, but the message was clear. My reluctance to fund the vacation reflected a fundamental inability to understand what really mattered in family life. These comments stung because they touched on my own occasional feelings of being outside the central family circle due to my single status and career focus. While I had chosen my current life path deliberately and felt satisfied with my decisions, there were moments when I wondered if my different priorities made me less valuable or important to family dynamics. Tyler, Chloe, and Mason became increasingly excited about the possibility of their first ocean vacation, talking about it constantly during family gatherings and asking detailed questions about resort activities and beach experiences. Their enthusiasm was genuinely touching, but it also increased the pressure I felt to make their dreams come true. Disappointing adults was difficult enough. Disappointing children who had done nothing wrong felt almost unbearable. Amanda began, sharing articles and social media posts about the importance of family experiences and the lasting value of vacation memories. She forwarded me blog posts written by parents who had prioritized travel with their children, emphasizing how these shared adventures had strengthened family bonds and created treasured memories that lasted long after material purchases were forgotten. While these articles contained valuable insights about family relationships and priorities, their timing felt calculated to reinforce her argument for the Cancun vacation. The implicit message was that my reluctance to fund the trip revealed misguided priorities and a failure to understand what truly mattered in family life. My grandmother, Rosa, who typically stayed out of family financial discussions, asked me directly about the vacation during one of my regular visits to her small apartment. She had heard about Amanda's plans and was clearly excited about the possibility of a family trip that would include multiple generations. Her simple question about whether we were really going to Cancun carried the weight of her entire life, of sacrifices and deferred dreams. Rosa had worked multiple jobs for decades to support her family, rarely taking time off and never experiencing the kind of leisure travel that many people took for granted. The idea of a luxury vacation with her children and grandchildren represented something she had never imagined possible when she was raising her own family under much more difficult financial circumstances. Seeing her excitement about the vacation, and knowing that I had the power to make it happen or prevent it from happening, felt like an enormous responsibility. Part of me wanted to fund the trip just to see the joy on her face as she experienced the ocean for the first time. But another part of me resented being put in the position of having to choose between my own financial boundaries and my grandmother's happiness. As the pressure mounted from multiple family members, I began to notice how isolated I felt in my concerns about the vacation funding. Every conversation seemed designed to emphasize how unreasonable my hesitation was and how much disappointment my refusal would cause. No one acknowledged the legitimacy of my financial concerns or the reasonableness of wanting to establish clearer boundaries around family assistance. This isolation was particularly challenging because it made me question my own perceptions and motivations. Was I being selfish and ungrateful, as several family members had suggested? Was my professional success making me lose sight of what really mattered in family relationships? Was my desire for financial boundaries evidence of values that were incompatible with my cultural heritage and family loyalty? I found myself second-guessing decisions and perspectives that had seemed clear when I discussed them with Dr. Walsh or my friend Rachel. The constant pressure and emotional manipulation were wearing down my confidence and making it difficult to maintain perspective on the broader patterns that had led to this situation. During this period, I also began to notice how my family interactions had become increasingly focused on the vacation request and my response to it. Conversations that used to cover a wide range of topics now seemed to revolve around travel plans, financial considerations, and family obligations. My relationships with individual family members were being overshadowed by this single issue and the expectations surrounding it. The stress of navigating these family dynamics began to affect other areas of my life. I found it difficult to concentrate at work, often spending time during the day replaying family conversations and trying to figure out how to respond to various pressures and expectations. My appetite decreased, and I had trouble sleeping as my mind churned through the emotional and practical implications of different decisions. Rachel noticed the changes in my mood and energy level, pointing out that the family vacation issue was consuming mental and emotional resources that I needed for other aspects of my life. She encouraged me to set a deadline for making a final decision, rather than allowing the uncertainty and pressure to continue indefinitely. Marcus at work also observed that I seemed distracted and stressed, though he didn't know the specific details of what I was dealing with at home. During a lunch conversation, he shared more about his own experiences with family financial boundaries, emphasizing how much better his family relationships had become once everyone understood the limits and expectations around financial assistance. His perspective helped me understand that the temporary discomfort of establishing boundaries was likely to be less damaging to family relationships than the long-term resentment and dysfunction that would result from continuing the current pattern. He pointed out that unclear expectations and assumptions were more harmful to family dynamics than honest conversations about limits and capabilities. As October progressed, the vacation planning became more urgent and detailed. Amanda had identified specific resort packages that required early booking to secure the best rates, and she was growing increasingly anxious about the need to make reservations soon. She began framing the timing pressure as evidence that my indecision was putting the entire vacation at risk, even if I eventually decided to fund it. This artificial urgency felt like another manipulation tactic, designed to force a quick decision that favored her preferred outcome. But it also represented a real deadline that required me to move beyond endless analysis and make a definitive choice about how to proceed. I scheduled another session with Dr. Walsh to discuss decision-making strategies and to prepare for the family conversations that would inevitably follow whatever choice I made. She helped me clarify my own priorities and values, distinguishing between my genuine desire to help family and my resentment about the assumptions and expectations that had developed around that help. During this session, I realized that my decision about the vacation funding would send a message about my role in the family going forward, regardless of what choice I made. Agreeing to pay for the trip would reinforce the pattern of financial dependency and likely lead to similar requests in the future. Refusing to pay would create immediate conflict, but might establish healthier boundaries for long-term relationships. Dr. Walsh helped me understand that neither choice was inherently right or wrong, but that I needed to make a decision that aligned with my own values and long-term goals for family relationships. She emphasized the importance of communicating my decision clearly and compassionately, while also being prepared for strong emotional reactions from family members who had different expectations. With this professional guidance and a clearer understanding of my own motivations, I finally felt ready to make a definitive decision about the Cancun vacation funding. The choice I made would set the tone for family financial dynamics for years to come, and I wanted to ensure that it reflected my genuine values rather than my fear of disappointing people I loved. I decided to call Amanda and arrange a family meeting where I could communicate my decision to everyone at once, rather than having separate conversations that might lead to confusion or misunderstanding. This approach would also allow me to explain my reasoning comprehensively and answer questions or concerns directly. The family meeting was scheduled for the following Sunday dinner, giving everyone time to attend and ensuring that my decision was communicated in a familiar, comfortable setting. As the day approached, I felt nervous, but also relieved to finally be moving toward resolution of an issue that had been consuming so much mental and emotional energy. Amanda seemed optimistic about the family meeting, apparently interpreting my willingness to discuss the vacation with everyone as a positive sign that I was moving toward agreement. Her excitement and anticipation made me feel somewhat guilty about the disappointment I was likely to cause, but I reminded myself that clear communication was better than continued uncertainty for everyone involved. My parents also seemed hopeful about the family meeting, asking questions about what I wanted to discuss and whether I had made any decisions about vacation plans. Their obvious anticipation made the upcoming conversation even more challenging, but I knew that avoiding difficult discussions would only make the situation worse over time. The night before the family meeting, I spent considerable time preparing what I wanted to say and anticipating possible responses from different family members. I wrote down key points to ensure that I communicated my decision clearly and completely, regardless of emotional reactions or attempts to change my mind during the conversation. I also prepared myself emotionally for the likelihood that my decision would be met with disappointment, anger, and possibly accusations about my character and values. Dr. Walsh had helped me understand that these reactions would reflect my family's disappointment about the vacation outcome, rather than accurate assessments of my worthiness as a daughter and sister. As I drove to my parents' house that Sunday afternoon, I felt a mixture of anxiety and determination. The conversation I was about to have would likely be one of the most difficult family discussions of my life, but it was also an opportunity to establish healthier patterns of communication and expectation that could benefit everyone in the long run. The familiar smells of my mother's cooking and the sounds of children playing in the backyard provided a comforting backdrop as I prepared to share my decision with the people who had shaped my life in countless important ways. Whatever the immediate consequences of my choice, I knew that I was finally ready to advocate for my own needs while maintaining my love and respect for family relationships that remained fundamentally important to me. Sunday dinner at my parents' house followed its usual rhythm, with my mother bustling around the kitchen making final preparations while my father watched football in the living room, and Amanda's children played elaborate games that involved running between rooms and making considerable noise. The familiar chaos felt both comforting and slightly surreal, given the serious conversation I knew was coming. Amanda arrived early and immediately began helping with dinner preparations, chatting with my mother about resort amenities and travel logistics as if the vacation funding had already been confirmed. Her optimism and excitement were evident in every comment and gesture, making my upcoming announcement feel even more consequential and difficult. Kevin spent most of the pre-dinner time talking with my father about work and local sports, but I noticed him occasionally glancing in my direction with an expression that seemed to combine hope and entitlement. His assumption that I would ultimately agree to fund the vacation was clear in his relaxed demeanor and casual references to Christmas travel plans. Tyler, Chloe, and Mason were particularly energetic that afternoon, running around the house and yard while talking excitedly about swimming with dolphins and building elaborate sandcastles. Their innocent enthusiasm for experiences they had never had made my chest feel tight with the knowledge that I was about to disappoint them through no fault of their own. My grandmother Rosa arrived just as we were sitting down to eat, moving slowly but with obvious excitement about spending time with her extended family. She had dressed up more than usual for Sunday dinner, wearing a bright blue blouse that I recognized as one she saved for special occasions. Her anticipation about potential family vacation plans was evident in her animated conversation and frequent smiles. The dinner conversation naturally drifted toward travel and vacation experiences, with Amanda sharing articles she had read about Cancun attractions and my parents discussing friends who had taken similar trips. The assumption that our family vacation was moving toward reality permeated every comment and story, creating an atmosphere of shared excitement that made my impending announcement feel like a betrayal. As we finished eating and my mother began clearing dishes, Amanda suggested that this might be a good time for me to share whatever I had wanted to discuss with everyone. Her tone was expectant and positive, clearly anticipating confirmation of vacation funding rather than the refusal I was actually planning to communicate. I took a deep breath and asked everyone to remain seated so I could explain my thoughts about the vacation request and family financial assistance more generally. The shift in my tone immediately caught everyone's attention, and I could see Amanda's expression change from anticipation to concern as she realized that my announcement might not be what she had expected. I began by expressing my love for everyone gathered around the table and my genuine appreciation for the family relationships that had supported and shaped me throughout my life. I acknowledged the sacrifices my parents had made for my education and success, and I emphasized my gratitude for the values and work ethic they had instilled in me. But I also explained that I had been feeling increasingly uncomfortable with the pattern of financial expectations that had developed over recent years. I shared my observation that family conversations had become increasingly focused on money and financial assistance, and that my role in family dynamics seemed to be shifting from daughter and sister to primary financial resource. I told them about my conversations with Dr. Walsh and what I had learned about healthy family financial relationships. I emphasized that my concerns weren't about wanting to help less, but about creating sustainable patterns that honored everyone's autonomy and dignity while maintaining strong family connections. The room was completely silent as I explained my decision about the Cancun vacation. I told them that I would not be funding the trip, not because I didn't want them to have wonderful experiences, but because I needed to establish clearer boundaries around family financial assistance. I explained that agreeing to pay for the vacation would reinforce assumptions and expectations that were becoming problematic for everyone involved. Amanda's reaction was immediate and intense. Her face flushed red as she accused me of being selfish and cruel, of caring more about money than family relationships. She pointed out that $8,000 was a small amount compared to my annual income, and that my refusal to help revealed something fundamental about my character and values. Kevin joined the attack, suggesting that my success had made me forget where I came from and who had supported me along the way. He pointed out that people with children had different priorities and responsibilities, implying that my single status made me incapable of understanding what really mattered in family life. My mother's reaction was quieter, but equally painful. She looked genuinely hurt and confused, asking why I was making such a big issue about helping family when I had always been generous in the past. She wondered if my therapy sessions were teaching me to be more selfish and less connected to family values. My father's response was more controlled, but still clearly disappointed. He pointed out that he had never asked for much during his lifetime, and that the possibility of one special vacation with his children and grandchildren had meant more to him than I apparently understood. His quiet disappointment felt more devastating than the angry accusations from Amanda and Kevin. Tyler, Chloe, and Mason looked confused and upset by the adult emotions swirling around them. Chloe began crying when she realized that the vacation she had been looking forward to was not going to happen, and Tyler asked directly why I didn't want them to have fun on their Christmas vacation. My grandmother Rosa remained silent throughout the initial reactions, but her expression showed deep sadness and disappointment. The excitement and anticipation she had been feeling about a potential family vacation had been replaced by confusion about why I was unwilling to make something wonderful happen for people I claimed to love. I tried to explain my reasoning more, clearly, emphasizing that my decision wasn't about the money itself, but about the pattern of assumptions and expectations that had developed around my financial contributions. I shared my concerns about what would happen if I continued to say yes to every financial request without establishing clear boundaries and mutual understanding, but my family was too emotional to hear my explanations clearly. Amanda accused me of using therapy language to justify selfishness. while Kevin suggested that I was punishing them for being less financially successful than I was. My parents seemed bewildered by my insistence on boundaries and formal discussions about what they saw as natural family support. The conversation deteriorated quickly from there, with multiple people talking at once and emotions escalating beyond productive discussion. Amanda gathered her children and announced that they were leaving, stating that she didn't want her kids exposed to the kind of selfishness I was displaying. Kevin made several cutting remarks about my priorities and values as they collected their belongings. My parents didn't leave, but their disappointment was evident in their silence and the way they avoided eye contact as I tried to continue explaining my perspective. My grandmother Rosa asked to be taken home early, saying that she was too tired and upset to stay for the usual post-dinner visit. I drove home that evening feeling emotionally drained and questioning whether I had made the right decision. The immediate aftermath was more painful than I had anticipated, even though Dr. Walsh had prepared me for strong reactions. Seeing the genuine hurt and disappointment in my family's faces made me wonder if maintaining financial boundaries was worth the relationship damage it seemed to be causing. But I also felt a strange sense of relief at having finally communicated my perspective clearly and decisively. The uncertainty and pressure that had been building for weeks was finally resolved, even if the resolution was not what anyone else had wanted. I had advocated for my own needs and boundaries, something I had rarely done in family contexts. Over the following days, the silence from my family was deafening. Nobody called to continue our conversation or to check on how I was feeling after the difficult family meeting. The lack of communication felt like punishment for my refusal to fund the vacation, and it reinforced my sense that my value to the family was primarily financial rather than personal. Amanda posted several social media updates about the challenges of planning family vacations on limited budgets, with vague references to disappointment and the importance of family support. While she didn't mention me directly, the timing and content of her posts made it clear that she was sharing her perspective on our vacation funding conflict with her online network. I found myself checking social media obsessively, looking for indirect references to our family situation, and trying to gauge how the story was being told to extended family and mutual friends. The public nature of Amanda's disappointment added another layer of stress and embarrassment to an already difficult situation. My mother sent a brief text message asking if I was okay, but when I responded with an attempt to continue our conversation about family financial dynamics, she didn't reply. The message felt more like a formality than genuine interest in understanding my perspective or rebuilding our relationship. The isolation and silence felt worse than the angry confrontation had been. At least during the family meeting, everyone was communicating honestly about their feelings and reactions. The cold shoulder treatment that followed felt designed to punish me for my decision and pressure me to reconsider my position. During this difficult period, my support network became crucial for maintaining perspective and emotional stability. Rachel checked in regularly, offering both practical advice about family boundary setting and emotional support during moments when I questioned my decisions. She reminded me that healthy relationships required mutual respect and understanding, not just accommodation and financial support. Marcus shared more details about his own experiences with family financial boundaries, including the difficult period immediately after he had established new limits on family assistance. He assured me that the initial anger and disappointment would likely fade as family members adjusted to new expectations and found alternative solutions to their financial challenges. Dr. Walsh helped me process the emotions that followed the family meeting, particularly my guilt about disappointing people I loved and my fear that I had permanently damaged important relationships. She reminded me that change was always difficult, and that my family's strong reaction indicated how much the current pattern meant to them, even if it wasn't sustainable for me. As November began, I realized that the vacation situation had created an opportunity to establish new patterns of family communication and mutual respect, even though the immediate consequences were painful. The crisis had forced everyone to confront assumptions and expectations that had never been explicitly discussed, creating the possibility for more honest relationships going forward. But I also recognized that rebuilding trust and understanding would require time and continued effort from everyone involved. My decision to refuse vacation funding was just the beginning of a longer process of redefining family relationships and establishing healthier patterns of support and communication. The Cold War that followed my refusal to fund the Cancun vacation lasted 3 weeks, during which my family perfected the art of making me feel invisible while simultaneously making their disappointment impossible to ignore. Amanda's social media campaign intensified, with carefully crafted posts about the importance of family unity and supporting those we love during difficult times. She shared inspirational quotes about selflessness and sacrifice, each one timed perfectly to appear in my feed when I was most likely to see it. My mother adopted a strategy of wounded silence, answering my calls with polite but distant responses that made every conversation feel like I was speaking to a stranger. When I asked about her week or shared updates about my work, she would respond with minimal acknowledgement before quickly ending the call. The woman who had once talked to me for hours about everything from neighborhood gossip to family memories now seemed to have nothing to say to her own daughter. My father's approach was more subtle but equally effective. He stopped calling altogether, something that felt particularly significant because he had made a habit of checking in weekly since my college graduation. The absence of his voice in my life created a silence that seemed to echo with disappointment and judgment about my character and priorities. Kevin ramped up his passive-aggressive commentary during the few family interactions that couldn't be avoided completely. At my cousin Natalie's birthday party, he made pointed remarks about the differences between people who understood family obligations and those who prioritized individual desires. His comments were always delivered with a smile and directed to others, but positioned where I couldn't avoid hearing them. The children's reactions were perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of the entire situation. Tyler, at 12, was old enough to understand that their vacation plans had fallen through because of my refusal to pay for the trip. His confusion about why his aunt would choose money over family happiness was evident in the way he looked at me during family gatherings, as if trying to figure out what had changed about me. Chloe, 9 years old and naturally affectionate, seemed to be struggling with conflicting messages about our relationship. She still wanted to hug me and share stories about school, but I could see her hesitation and the way she looked to her mother for approval before approaching me. The spontaneous warmth that had always characterized our relationship was being replaced by uncertainty and caution. Mason, the youngest at 6, was too small to understand the adult dynamics, but clearly sensed the tension and changes in family atmosphere. He became clingy with Amanda during family gatherings and seemed confused by the adults' serious faces and quiet conversations that stopped when he came near. My grandmother Rosa's reaction was perhaps the most devastating of all. She had always been the family matriarch who stayed above petty conflicts and maintained relationships with everyone regardless of their disagreements. But the disappointment about the vacation had clearly affected her deeply, and she seemed to view my decision as a rejection of everything she had taught me about family loyalty and sacrifice. During my usual weekly visit to her apartment, Rosa was polite but distant, lacking the warmth and storytelling that had always made our time together special. She answered my questions about her health and daily activities, but didn't ask about my life or share the family updates and neighborhood gossip that had always been central to our conversations. The isolation began affecting my work performance in ways I hadn't anticipated. Concentration became difficult as my mind constantly replayed family conversations and imagined different scenarios where I might have handled things better. I found myself checking my phone obsessively during meetings, hoping for messages that never came, and dreading the social media notifications that reminded me of my family's ongoing disappointment. My appetite disappeared almost completely, with food becoming something I forced myself to consume rather than enjoyed. sleep became elusive as my brain churned through guilt and second-guessing during the hours when I should have been resting. The stress manifested physically in tension headaches and a persistent knot in my stomach that made even simple tasks feel exhausting. Rachel noticed the changes immediately and expressed concern about the toll the family conflict was taking on my overall well-being. She pointed out that I was losing weight and seemed distracted even during conversations that had nothing to do with family dynamics. Her observation that I was punishing myself more than my family was punishing me hit uncomfortably close to home. Marcus at work also picked up on my declining mood and energy levels, though he was too professional to pry into personal details. During a team lunch, he casually mentioned that family conflicts often felt overwhelming in the moment, but usually worked themselves out over time with patience and consistent communication. His gentle reassurance helped me remember that my current situation wasn't permanent, even though it felt endless. Dr. Walsh helped me understand that the isolation and emotional manipulation I was experiencing were common responses from families whose financial expectations had been challenged. She explained that the intensity of their reaction actually confirmed that my boundaries were necessary, because healthy families would be willing to discuss and negotiate rather than punish and exclude. During this period, I also began to notice how much mental and emotional energy I had been devoting to managing family relationships and expectations. Without the constant requests for financial assistance and the pressure to solve everyone's problems, I had space to focus on other aspects of my life that had been neglected during years of family financial management. I threw myself into work, projects with renewed focus, tackling complex coding challenges that had been on the back burner while I dealt with family drama. My manager noticed the improvement in my productivity and creativity, commenting that I seemed more engaged and innovative than I had been in months. The recognition felt good and reminded me that my professional identity existed independently of my role as family financial resource. I also rediscovered hobbies and interests that had been pushed aside by family obligations and guilt about spending money on myself rather than helping others. I signed up for a rock climbing class that met twice a week, finding physical challenge and mental focus that provided relief from emotional stress. The climbing community welcomed newcomers warmly, and I began developing friendships based on shared interests rather than family connections. My living space received attention that it had needed for months as I channeled nervous energy into organizing and redecorating projects that made my apartment feel more like a true home rather than just a place to sleep between work and family obligations. Creating a space that reflected my own tastes and priorities felt symbolic of the broader changes I was trying to make in my life. But despite these positive developments, the ongoing family silence created a constant undercurrent of sadness and uncertainty. Every holiday that approached felt complicated by the knowledge that family gatherings would be tense and awkward. Every family milestone or celebration raised questions about whether I would be included or welcome, and whether my presence would create more conflict than connection. The Thanksgiving holiday arrived with particular complexity, as it traditionally involved elaborate family gatherings at my parents' house, with multiple generations and extensive meal preparation that required several days of coordination. I waited for an invitation that felt increasingly unlikely as the date approached, and no one mentioned holiday plans in my presence. Finally, my mother called 3 days before Thanksgiving with what felt like a duty invitation rather than a genuine desire for my company. Her tone was formal and distant as she asked if I planned to attend family dinner, and she quickly clarified that Amanda and her family would be there as usual. The implication was clear: I could come if I wanted to, but my presence wouldn't be particularly welcomed or celebrated. I spent considerable time debating whether to attend Thanksgiving dinner or create my own alternative celebration. Part of me wanted to maintain family traditions and show that I remained committed to family relationships despite our disagreements. But another part of me dreaded spending an entire day in an atmosphere of tension and passive-aggressive communication. Dr. Walsh helped me think through the decision by exploring what I hoped to accomplish by attending, and whether those goals were realistic, given the current family dynamics. She pointed out that forcing family interaction during a time of high emotion and unresolved conflict might create more problems than it solved, and that sometimes taking space allowed relationships to heal more effectively than pushing for premature reconciliation. I ultimately decided to attend Thanksgiving dinner, but with clear boundaries about my time and energy. I would arrive when the meal was ready rather than helping with preparation, and I would leave early if the atmosphere became too uncomfortable or hostile. This approach allowed me to show up for family while protecting myself from extended exposure to manipulation and guilt trips. Thanksgiving Day arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood as I drove to my parents' house for what I expected to be one of the most awkward family gatherings of my life. I had prepared mentally for various scenarios, from outright hostility to icy politeness, but I wasn't prepared for what actually happened when I walked through the front door. The house was unusually quiet for a holiday gathering, lacking the energy and excitement that typically characterized family celebrations. Amanda and Kevin were in the kitchen with my mother, but their conversation stopped abruptly when I entered. The children were watching television in the living room, but seemed subdued compared to their usual holiday enthusiasm. My father greeted me with a brief hug that felt obligatory rather than warm, and we exchanged polite inquiries about work and weather that could have taken place between strangers. The easy conversation and gentle teasing that had always characterized our relationship was replaced by careful formality that made every interaction feel strained and artificial. Amanda acknowledged my presence with a nod but made no effort to include me in kitchen conversations or meal preparation activities. Kevin ignored me almost completely, focusing his attention on helping the children and discussing sports with my father. The message was clear. I was tolerated, but not welcomed, included but not embraced. My grandmother Rosa arrived shortly after I did, moving slowly but with the dignity she had maintained throughout her 82 years. Her greeting was polite, but lacked the warmth and affection that had always made me feel special in her eyes. She settled into her usual chair and accepted offers of help with quiet grace. But she didn't seek out conversation or share the family stories that typically entertained everyone during holiday gatherings. The dinner itself was a masterpiece of awkward politeness, with conversation focused on safe topics like weather, local news, and general holiday traditions. Nobody mentioned the elephant in the room, but its presence affected every interaction and made even simple requests to pass dishes feel loaded with unspoken tension and resentment. Tyler tried several times to engage me in conversation about school and his upcoming basketball season, but his efforts were met with subtle discouragement from his parents that made him increasingly confused and withdrawn. Chloe sat next to me at the table but seemed uncertain about whether she was allowed to enjoy my company or share her usual chatter about friends and activities. Mason, oblivious to the adult dynamics but sensitive to the general atmosphere, ate quietly and asked when they could go home several times throughout the meal. His desire to leave reflected the general discomfort that everyone was feeling, but nobody was acknowledging directly. The conversation took an unexpected turn when my cousin Natalie mentioned her recent engagement and began discussing wedding planning details with obvious excitement. Her joy and enthusiasm created a brief moment of genuine warmth around the table, as family members shared advice and offered congratulations with real affection and interest. But even this positive development carried undertones related to my current family status. When Natalie mentioned hoping to have a destination wedding but worrying about the costs involved, Amanda made pointed comments about the importance of family support during major life events and how disappointing it was when people prioritized money over meaningful celebrations. The indirect reference to my vacation funding refusal was unmistakable, and it successfully shifted the conversation back to uncomfortable territory, where every comment seemed designed to highlight my supposed selfishness and lack of family commitment. I found myself analyzing every statement for hidden meanings and preparing defensive responses to accusations that were never made directly. As the meal concluded and people began clearing dishes, I realized that my presence was creating more tension than connection, and that my goal of maintaining family relationships wasn't being served by forcing interaction during such an emotionally charged time. I announced that I needed to leave early due to work obligations, a transparent excuse that fooled nobody, but provided face-saving cover for my departure. The goodbyes were perfunctory and distant, lacking the warmth and affection that had always characterized family partings in the past. Amanda didn't look up from the dishes she was washing when I said goodbye, and Kevin offered only a brief nod of acknowledgement. My parents walked me to the door, but their hugs felt obligatory rather than affectionate. My grandmother Rosa accepted my goodbye kiss on her cheek, but didn't meet my eyes or offer the blessing she typically gave when family members departed. Her silence felt like a withdrawal of approval and support that cut deeper than any direct criticism could have. I drove home feeling emotionally drained and more isolated than ever, questioning whether my decision to attend had been worthwhile or had simply provided another opportunity for family members to express their disappointment and disapproval. The holiday that should have been about gratitude and family connection had instead reinforced the distance and conflict that seemed to be growing rather than diminishing over time. But as I reflected on the day's events, I also recognized that I had maintained my own dignity and boundaries, despite considerable pressure to apologize or compromise my position. I had shown up for family while protecting myself from manipulation and guilt trips that would have made the situation even more difficult to navigate. The week following Thanksgiving brought unexpected developments that shifted the family dynamics in ways I hadn't anticipated. Amanda called me at work, something she hadn't done since our coffee shop conversation weeks earlier. Her tone was different from our recent interactions, less hostile but still cautious, as if she was testing the waters for possible reconciliation. She explained that the ongoing family conflict was affecting her children in ways she hadn't expected, particularly Tyler, who had been asking increasingly difficult questions about why family members were angry with each other and whether the problems were his fault. Her maternal instincts were struggling with her resentment about the vacation funding, creating internal conflict about how to handle the situation going forward. Amanda didn't apologize for her previous behavior or acknowledge the legitimacy of my financial boundaries, but she seemed genuinely concerned about the impact of family tension on her children's emotional well-being. She asked if we could find a way to interact more normally during family gatherings, not necessarily resolving our underlying disagreements, but at least preventing the children from feeling responsible for adult conflicts. I appreciated her willingness to reach out and her recognition that the ongoing tension was affecting innocent parties who had no control over the situation. We agreed to try being civil and polite during family interactions, focusing on maintaining relationships with the children while continuing to work through our own issues privately rather than in front of everyone. This conversation represented the first crack in the wall of silence and hostility that had surrounded me since my vacation funding refusal. While it didn't resolve any fundamental issues, it opened the possibility for gradual improvement in family relationships and reduced the immediate stress of navigating family gatherings. But even as Amanda and I worked toward détente, other family members remained committed to their strategy of isolation and emotional manipulation. My parents continued their pattern of distant politeness, and Kevin maintained his passive-aggressive commentary about family values and obligations. The improvement in my relationship with Amanda was a positive development, but it didn't address the broader pattern of expectations and assumptions that had created the conflict in the first place. As December began, the vacation issue took on new urgency and complexity. Amanda had been researching alternative options for Christmas travel, exploring less expensive destinations and more modest accommodations that might be within their family's budget without my financial contribution. But even scaled-back vacation plans were beyond their financial reach, and the reality of spending another Christmas at home was becoming increasingly apparent. The children's disappointment about the canceled vacation plans intensified as Christmas approached and their friends discussed holiday travel plans. Tyler had apparently told classmates about their planned trip to Cancun, and now had to explain why the vacation was no longer happening. His embarrassment and confusion about the situation added another layer of guilt to my already complicated feelings about my decision. Chloe had been counting down days until the vacation and had made elaborate plans for beach activities and resort adventures that would now never happen. Her tears and questions about why things had changed created additional pressure on Amanda, who was struggling to explain adult financial decisions to a 9-year-old who only understood that her Christmas dreams were being crushed. Mason's disappointment was less articulate but equally heartbreaking, as he had been excited about flying on an airplane and seeing the ocean for the first time. His simple questions about when they were going to the beach required answers that were too complex for a 6-year-old to understand fully. The ongoing vacation disappointment was affecting Amanda's relationship with Kevin as well, as financial stress intensified existing tensions in their marriage. Kevin had been looking forward to the vacation as much as the children, seeing it as an opportunity to experience luxury and relaxation that was normally beyond their reach. His resentment about my refusal to fund the trip was spilling over into criticism of Amanda for even asking and creating conflict in their relationship. My parents were also struggling with the vacation cancellation, particularly my father, who had been genuinely excited about experiencing ocean travel for the first time in his life. His disappointment wasn't just about missing a specific trip, but about the broader recognition that his retirement years might not include the adventures and experiences he had deferred during decades of financial responsibility and family obligations. My grandmother Rosa's sadness about the canceled vacation represented perhaps the most poignant aspect of the entire situation. At 82, she had limited time and energy for major travel, and the opportunity to experience a luxury vacation with multiple generations of her family had seemed like a once-in-a-lifetime possibility that was now lost forever. As I observed the ripple effects of my decision throughout the family, I found myself questioning whether my financial boundaries were worth the disappointment and sadness they were causing people I genuinely loved. The intellectual understanding that boundaries were necessary for healthy relationships felt abstract compared to the concrete evidence of family pain that I was witnessing daily. Dr. Walsh helped me process these complex feelings during our sessions, pointing out that my family's disappointment was real and understandable, but that it didn't necessarily mean my decision was wrong. She emphasized that healthy boundaries often created temporary discomfort as people adjusted to new expectations, and that my guilt about others' reactions was a normal part of the boundary-setting process. She also helped me recognize that my family's intense focus on the vacation represented a broader pattern of using emotional pressure to override my autonomy and decision-making authority. The fact that nobody was discussing alternative solutions or acknowledging my legitimate concerns suggested that the issue was more about control and compliance than about genuine family connection and support. As Christmas week approached, I found myself facing a decision that would either reinforce or undermine everything I had been trying to establish through my vacation funding refusal. Amanda made one final appeal, not for full vacation funding, but for partial assistance that might make a smaller family trip possible during the holiday period. Her proposal involved a local resort in the Texas Hill Country, a 3-day getaway that would cost approximately $2,000 for her family and could provide some of the special memories they had been hoping to create during Christmas week. The reduced scope and cost of this alternative seemed designed to make my continued refusal appear even more unreasonable and selfish. The timing of this request, just days before Christmas, created maximum emotional pressure and minimum time for thoughtful consideration. Amanda framed the proposal as a Christmas gift for the children, emphasizing their disappointment about the canceled Cancun trip and their need for something special to salvage their holiday season. But even this scaled-back request represented the same fundamental pattern that had created our original conflict. The assumption that my resources were available to solve family financial problems and fulfill wishes that others couldn't afford, independently. Agreeing to fund the local resort trip would send a message that my boundaries were negotiable, and that sufficient emotional pressure could override my stated limits on family financial assistance. The decision I faced in those final days before Christmas would determine whether my months of difficult boundary setting had established new patterns of family interaction, or whether I would retreat back into my old role as family financial resource when confronted with sufficient guilt and pressure. Everything I had learned about healthy relationships and personal autonomy was about to be tested in the most challenging way possible. The pressure to fund the Hill Country resort trip intensified during the 3 days leading up to Christmas, as Amanda deployed every emotional weapon in her arsenal to change my mind. She called twice daily with updates about the children's excitement over the possibility of a Christmas getaway, describing Tyler's renewed hope and Chloe's careful questions about whether they might still have a special vacation after all. Kevin added his voice to the campaign, calling me directly for the first time since our family dinner confrontation. His approach was different from Amanda's emotional appeals, focusing instead on practical arguments about compromise and family problem-solving. He pointed out that $2,000 was a fraction of the original Cancun cost, suggesting that my continued refusal to help with this modest request proved that my objections had never really been about money, but about something deeper and more troubling. My mother's involvement was perhaps the most painful aspect of this final push. She called on Christmas Eve morning, her voice heavy with disappointment and what sounded like genuine confusion about my choices. She reminded me that Christmas had always been about family generosity and creating joy for others, particularly children who depended on adults to make their dreams come true. During this conversation, my mother shared details about her own childhood Christmases, when her parents had sacrificed considerably to provide small gifts and special experiences despite severe financial constraints. She drew explicit parallels between their willingness to stretch beyond their means for family happiness and what she saw as my unwillingness to help despite having abundant resources. The emotional manipulation reached its peak when my mother mentioned that my grandmother Rosa had been asking about the family vacation plans, apparently hoping that something might still be salvaged from the original Cancun dreams. The image of my elderly grandmother disappointed during what might be one of her last Christmas celebrations felt designed to break down my resistance through pure guilt and emotional pressure. My father's contribution to this final campaign was characteristically indirect, but equally effective. He stopped by my apartment on Christmas Eve afternoon, ostensibly to deliver a small gift, but actually to make one last appeal for family unity and compromise. His approach was gentle and thoughtful, acknowledging my concerns about financial boundaries while emphasizing the unique circumstances of Christmas and the children's expectations. He shared his own regrets about opportunities missed during his working years, times when financial caution had prevented family experiences that might have created lasting memories. His subtle message was that I was repeating his mistakes, prioritizing financial security over family connection, and missing chances to create joy that might not come again. The timing of these appeals, concentrated in the final hours before Christmas, created a sense of urgency and finality that made every decision feel momentous and irreversible. The implication was that saying no to this final, modest request would confirm my transformation from beloved family member to selfish outsider who valued money more than relationships. But despite the intense emotional pressure, something had shifted in my perspective during the months of conflict and boundary-setting work with Dr. Walsh. I recognized the manipulation tactics being used against me, and I understood that giving in to this final request would undermine everything I had been trying to establish about healthy family financial relationships. The Hill Country resort proposal wasn't really about creating Christmas memories or helping disappointed children. It was about testing whether my boundaries were real or whether sufficient emotional pressure could still override my stated limits on family financial assistance. Agreeing to fund this trip would send a clear message that my boundaries were negotiable and that persistent pressure could eventually wear down my resistance. I spent Christmas Eve evening composing a carefully worded response to my family's final vacation funding request. The message acknowledged their disappointment and expressed my understanding of their desire to create special Christmas experiences for the children. But it also reiterated my commitment to the financial boundaries I had established and explained why consistency was important for long-term family relationship health. I sent individual messages to Amanda, my parents, and Kevin, tailoring each response to address their specific concerns while maintaining the same fundamental message about boundaries and family financial assistance. The process of writing these messages felt both empowering and heartbreaking, as I asserted my autonomy while simultaneously disappointing people I genuinely loved. Christmas Day passed quietly and sadly, with minimal family interaction and a palpable sense of loss that extended beyond the canceled vacation to encompass broader changes in family relationships. I spent the day alone by choice, using the time for reflection and self-care, rather than forcing uncomfortable family interactions that would have satisfied no one. The week between Christmas and New Year's brought an unexpected development that would change everything about the vacation situation and my family relationships. Amanda called on December 27th with news that initially seemed positive, but quickly revealed its problematic implications. She had been researching family vacation options obsessively during the holiday period, unable to let go of her dreams of a special family trip despite my refusal to provide funding. During this research, she had discovered a travel company that offered payment plans for vacation packages, allowing families to book trips immediately and pay the costs over time through monthly installments. Amanda had found a Cancun package similar to her original plan, available for booking with a small down payment and monthly payments spread over 18 months. The total cost was slightly higher than her original estimate due to financing charges, but the monthly payments were manageable within their current budget if they made certain sacrifices and adjustments to their spending. Her excitement about this discovery was infectious and initially made me happy for her family's ability to create the vacation experience they had been dreaming about for months. But as she explained the details of her financing arrangement, I began to understand the deeper implications of her decision and my potential role in the ongoing situation. The vacation payment plan required a co-signer with good credit and stable income to guarantee the monthly payments in case Amanda and Kevin were unable to meet their financial obligations. Without this co-signer, the travel company wouldn't approve the financing arrangement, and the vacation would remain out of reach despite the payment plan option. Amanda had initially approached Kevin's brother for co-signing assistance, but his own financial situation and credit history made him an unsuitable guarantor for such a substantial financial commitment. Other family members either lacked the financial qualifications or were unwilling to take on the responsibility for someone else's vacation debt. This left me as the only family member with the credit score, income stability, and financial resources necessary to co-sign Amanda's vacation financing arrangement. Her request for co-signing assistance was presented as a simple favor that would cost me nothing up front and would allow her family to fund their own vacation through monthly payments they could afford. But I understood immediately that co-signing for Amanda's vacation loan represented a different version of the same financial boundary issues that had created our original conflict. While I wouldn't be paying for the vacation directly, I would be accepting legal and financial responsibility for ensuring that the payments were made as agreed, regardless of changes in Amanda's financial situation. The co-signing request also demonstrated that Amanda had learned nothing from our months of conflict about financial boundaries and family expectations. Instead of accepting my refusal to fund their vacation and finding alternative ways to create family memories within their budget, she had simply found a more complex way to involve me in funding their financial dreams. I explained to Amanda that co-signing for her vacation loan would create the same problems that had led to my original refusal to fund the trip directly. I would be financially responsible for their vacation regardless of whether I wrote a check immediately or guaranteed their loan payments over time. The legal obligation and potential financial risk were essentially the same whether I paid $8,000 up front or co-signed for payments that could total even more over time. Amanda's reaction to my co-signing refusal was more intense than her original response to my vacation funding denial. She accused me of finding new ways to disappoint the family and suggested that my refusal to co-sign proved that my objections had never been about establishing healthy boundaries, but about refusing to help family in any meaningful way. She pointed out that co-signing wouldn't cost me anything unless they defaulted on payments, and that her family's track record of meeting financial obligations should provide confidence that the arrangement would work smoothly. Her argument ignored the fact that taking on legal responsibility for someone else's debt always carried risk, regardless of their previous payment history or current intentions. Kevin's involvement in pressuring me to co-sign the vacation loan added another layer of complexity to the situation. He called me directly to discuss the legal and financial aspects of the co-signing arrangement, presenting detailed information about the loan terms and payment schedule, in an attempt to demonstrate that the risk to me was minimal. His approach was more sophisticated than previous family pressure tactics, focusing on logical arguments about risk assessment and family financial cooperation rather than emotional appeals about children's disappointment or family unity. But the underlying assumption remained the same. My financial resources and credit standing existed primarily to solve family problems and fulfill dreams that others couldn't achieve independently. The co-signing request also revealed how determined Amanda was to have this vacation experience, regardless of the financial strain it would create for her family or the relationship conflicts it would perpetuate. She was willing to commit to 18 months of additional financial obligation and to put our family relationships through another round of conflict, rather than accept that some experiences were beyond her current financial reach. During this period, I consulted with Dr. Walsh about the co-signing request and its implications for the boundary-setting work we had been doing together. She helped me understand that agreeing to co-sign the vacation loan would completely undermine the progress I had made in establishing financial boundaries and would likely lead to future requests for financial assistance that would be even more difficult to refuse. Dr. Walsh also pointed out that Amanda's inability to accept my financial boundaries and her determination to find alternative ways to involve me in funding her family's vacation suggested deeper issues with respect and autonomy that extended beyond financial matters. The co-signing request was really about testing whether my boundaries were absolute or whether creative alternatives could circumvent my stated limits. I decided to refuse the co-signing request using the same principles that had guided my original vacation funding refusal. My decision wasn't about the specific financial risk or the likelihood that Amanda would make her payments as agreed. It was about maintaining the boundaries I had established and refusing to accept financial responsibility for other people's lifestyle choices and vacation dreams. The aftermath of my co-signing refusal was swift and decisive. Amanda announced that she was proceeding with booking the Cancun vacation anyway, using a different financing arrangement that didn't require a co-signer, but carried higher interest rates and more restrictive payment terms. Her decision to commit to this more expensive financing option felt like both a victory declaration and a punishment for my refusal to help. She made it clear that the family would be taking their vacation during the last week of December, traveling to Cancun for New Year's celebrations as originally planned. The financing arrangement she had secured was more costly and risky than the option that would have required my co-signature, but it allowed her to proceed with the vacation while making a statement about family relationships and financial independence. Amanda's announcement that the vacation was proceeding despite my refusal to provide funding or co-signing assistance created a complex mix of emotions that I struggled to process clearly. Part of me was genuinely happy that her family would have the vacation experience they had been dreaming about for months, and that the children would get to swim in the ocean and build sandcastles on Mexican beaches. But another part of me was troubled by the financial risk Amanda was taking to fund this vacation and the message it sent about priorities and decision-making. The higher interest rates and more restrictive payment terms of her alternative financing arrangement would create financial pressure for her family for years to come, all for the sake of a single week of vacation experiences. I also felt frustrated by the implicit criticism in Amanda's decision to proceed with expensive vacation financing, while maintaining that I had been unreasonable and selfish for refusing to help. Her willingness to commit to higher costs and greater financial risk suggested that money wasn't really the issue, but rather control and compliance with family expectations. The final week of December became a period of frenetic vacation preparation, as Amanda organized passports, packed suitcases, and coordinated travel logistics for her family's last-minute Cancun trip. Her social media presence shifted from subtle criticisms of my selfishness to excited updates about vacation planning and countdown posts about their upcoming adventure. My parents decided to join Amanda's family on the Cancun trip, using their savings and a small loan to cover their portion of the vacation costs. Their decision to participate despite the financial strain demonstrated their commitment to family unity and their willingness to sacrifice financially for experiences that might not come again. My grandmother Rosa also decided to join the vacation, with Amanda covering her costs as part of the overall financing arrangement. At 82, Rosa's inclusion in the trip represented both a wonderful opportunity for her to experience luxury travel and a poignant reminder of what I was choosing to miss by maintaining my financial boundaries. As December 30th approached, and my family prepared to leave for their New Year's vacation in Cancun, I found myself experiencing a complex mix of emotions that ranged from relief to regret to curiosity about what would happen next. The vacation that had dominated family conversations and conflicts for months was finally happening, but without my financial contribution or my physical presence. The morning of their departure, I received a group text with flight information, and travel logistics sent more as a courtesy than an invitation since everyone understood that I wouldn't be joining them. The message included photos of packed suitcases and excited family members preparing to leave for the airport, creating a sense of shared adventure that excluded me completely. Amanda had arranged for airport transportation that would pick up family members from different locations and coordinate their arrival for the afternoon flight to Cancun. The logistics were complex but manageable, involving car seats for the children, wheelchair assistance for my grandmother, and careful coordination of departure times from multiple households. I spent the morning of their departure focused on work projects and personal activities, trying not to think about the family vacation that was beginning without me. But as afternoon approached and I knew they were gathering at the airport for their flight, I found myself checking social media obsessively for updates and photos from their departure. The first photos appeared on Amanda's Instagram around 2 o'clock, showing the children with their rolling suitcases and excited faces as they prepared to experience airplane travel and ocean adventures. Tyler looked mature and responsible, helping with luggage, while Chloe and Mason bounced with anticipation about their upcoming adventure. Additional photos showed my parents and grandmother at the airport, dressed nicely for travel, and smiling with anticipation about their vacation experience. My father looked particularly happy and relaxed, probably looking forward to his first ocean vacation after decades of financial responsibility and delayed gratification. But something about these airport photos triggered a reaction I hadn't anticipated. Seeing my family gathered together for an expensive vacation that I had refused to fund, but that they had managed to finance through high-interest loans and personal savings, made me realize something important about the entire situation. The vacation wasn't really about money or financial capability. Amanda's family had ultimately found ways to fund their Cancun trip, despite my refusal to provide assistance. My parents had chosen to participate despite the financial strain it would create for their retirement budget. My grandmother had been included despite the additional costs involved. Everyone had been able to find solutions and make sacrifices to participate in this vacation when they were motivated to do so. The months of pressure on me to provide funding hadn't been about necessity or inability to afford the trip. They had been about convenience and the expectation that I should solve family financial challenges, rather than requiring everyone to find their own solutions. This realization crystallized everything I had been feeling, but couldn't articulate about: the vacation funding request and my family's reaction to my refusal. The intense emotional pressure, the guilt trips about disappointing children, the accusations about selfishness and family disloyalty, all of it had been designed to manipulate me into providing funding for something that was actually achievable through other means. My family's ability to fund their own vacation when I refused to provide assistance proved that my financial contribution had never been necessary, only preferred. They had wanted me to pay for their vacation so they wouldn't have to make sacrifices or take financial risks, but they were perfectly capable of finding alternative solutions when forced to do so. But even more troubling was the realization that this entire conflict had been manufactured to test my compliance with family financial expectations rather than to address genuine needs or emergencies. The vacation funding request had been designed to see whether I would maintain my boundaries or cave to emotional pressure and family loyalty appeals. Understanding the manipulative nature of the entire situation triggered a response I hadn't planned or anticipated. Instead of feeling relief that my family was enjoying their vacation without requiring my financial assistance, I felt angry about the months of emotional manipulation and the damage that had been done to our relationships for the sake of testing my compliance. The more I thought about Amanda's airport photos and the family's successful departure for their self-funded Cancun vacation, the more I realized that I had been played in a game whose rules I hadn't understood. My months of agonizing about disappointing family and my careful consideration of financial boundaries had been responses to a manufactured crisis designed to manipulate my behavior. This understanding sparked a decision that surprised even me. I opened my laptop and began researching travel options for last-minute trips to Cancun, curious about what it would cost to join my family's vacation independently. If they could finance their own trip despite months of claiming it was impossible without my assistance, I could certainly afford to fund my own participation. Within an hour, I had found and booked a flight that would arrive in Cancun the same evening as my family's flight. The last-minute ticket was expensive, but not prohibitively so, and I had vacation time available that I could use for an impromptu getaway. The spontaneous nature of the decision felt liberating after months of careful planning and boundary setting. But as I completed my travel booking and began throwing clothes into a suitcase, I realized that my motivation for joining the vacation wasn't really about family time or ocean experiences. I was angry about being manipulated and excluded, and I wanted to demonstrate that their emotional manipulation hadn't prevented me from participating in family activities on my own terms. The decision to fly to Cancun felt impulsive and emotionally driven rather than thoughtful and strategic. But it also felt like reclaiming my autonomy and refusing to accept the punishment and exclusion that my family had imposed for maintaining financial boundaries. I could participate in family experiences when I chose to do so, regardless of their expectations about funding and compliance. I called the airline and discovered that my family's flight had departed on schedule and was currently en route to Cancun. My flight would leave Austin 3 hours later and arrive at approximately the same time due to connection schedules. The timing would allow me to surprise my family at their resort, arriving independently and on my own terms. But as I drove to the airport with my hastily packed suitcase, I began to reconsider the wisdom of my impulsive decision. Showing up at my family's vacation uninvited might create more conflict than resolution, and it could be interpreted as either capitulation to their pressure or a hostile gesture designed to disrupt their carefully planned experience. The more I thought about my motivations for joining their vacation, the more I realized that I was acting out of anger and hurt rather than genuine desire for family connection. My decision to fly to Cancun was really about proving a point and asserting control rather than about creating positive family experiences or healing damaged relationships. By the time I reached Austin Bergstrom International Airport, I had made a different decision. Instead of checking in for my flight to Cancun and surprising my family with my arrival, I would cancel my trip and use the experience as an opportunity to establish final boundaries about family financial manipulation and emotional games. I approached the airline counter with my confirmation number and explained that I needed to cancel my ticket to Cancun due to changed circumstances. The agent was helpful and efficient, processing my cancellation and explaining the fees involved for last-minute changes. The financial penalty for canceling was significant, but seemed appropriate for my impulsive decision-making. But as I completed the cancellation process, I realized that I had an opportunity to send a more significant message about manipulation and family relationships. Instead of simply canceling my own ticket, I could cancel the tickets that Amanda's family was currently using for their flight to Cancun, since they had been purchased using financing that I had been asked to guarantee. The travel company that had arranged Amanda's vacation financing had required detailed financial information and contact details for potential co-signers during their application process. Although I had ultimately refused to co-sign their loan, my information was still in their system as someone authorized to make changes to the booking under certain circumstances. Using the confirmation numbers from Amanda's group text and the authorization information that the travel company had on file, I was able to access their vacation booking and review the terms of their financing arrangement. The loan documents included provisions for co-signer intervention in cases of financial risk or changed circumstances, giving me legal authority to modify or cancel the booking. The realization that I could cancel my family's vacation tickets while they were literally flying to Cancun felt like poetic justice for months of emotional manipulation and financial pressure. They had tried to force me to fund their vacation through guilt and family loyalty appeals, and when that failed, they had tried to involve me as a co-signer for financing that would make me legally responsible for their vacation debt. Their ability to fund the vacation independently proved that they had never actually needed my financial assistance, only wanted it for convenience and to avoid personal financial risk. Canceling their tickets would demonstrate that manipulation and emotional games had consequences, and that excluding me from family activities while expecting my financial support was unacceptable. I spent several minutes at the airport customer service counter, accessing Amanda's vacation booking and reviewing the cancellation policies for their flights and resort reservations. The financing arrangement included provisions that allowed authorized parties to cancel bookings in cases of financial emergency or changed circumstances, giving me legal grounds for the action I was contemplating. The decision to cancel their tickets felt both vindictive and justified, a response to months of manipulation that would finally demonstrate the consequences of treating me as a financial resource rather than a family member. But it would also be devastating for my family, particularly the children who were excited about their first ocean vacation and had no responsibility for the adult conflicts that had created this situation. As I stood at the airline counter with my finger hovering over the cancellation button, I realized that this decision would fundamentally change my relationships with everyone in my family forever. Canceling their vacation tickets while they were en route to Cancun would be seen as cruel and vindictive, regardless of the manipulation and pressure that had led to this moment. But I also understood that allowing the manipulation and emotional games to continue without consequences would only encourage more of the same behavior in the future. My family needed to understand that excluding me from family activities while expecting my financial support was unacceptable, and that using children as emotional weapons to pressure financial compliance had serious consequences. The weight of the decision felt enormous as I considered the immediate and long-term implications of canceling their vacation tickets. The children would be devastated, my parents would be humiliated, and my grandmother might never forgive me for destroying what could be her last opportunity for luxury travel. But the alternative was accepting a pattern of manipulation and financial exploitation that had been escalating for years and would likely continue indefinitely unless decisive action was taken. The vacation cancellation would send a clear message about boundaries and consequences that no amount of discussion or explanation had been able to communicate effectively. Taking a deep breath and thinking about everything my family had put me through during this months-long conflict, I clicked the cancellation button and confirmed the termination of their Cancun vacation booking. Their flights were canceled, their resort reservations were terminated, and their financing arrangement was voided due to changed circumstances and co-signer intervention. The process was surprisingly quick and efficient, completed within minutes despite the complexity of the multi-person booking and the financing arrangements involved. The airline and travel company systems were designed to handle last-minute changes and cancellations, even for complicated group bookings like my family's vacation package. As I walked away from the customer service counter, I felt a complex mix of emotions that ranged from relief to regret, to anticipation about what would happen when my family discovered their vacation had been canceled. The immediate consequence would be chaos and devastation, but the long-term impact might be healthier family relationships based on mutual respect rather than manipulation and financial exploitation. I drove home from the airport knowing that my phone would soon be buzzing with frantic calls from family members trying to understand what had happened to their vacation booking and how it could be resolved. The next few hours would be extremely difficult, but they would also provide clarity about family relationships and boundaries that had been clouded by months of manipulation and emotional pressure. The notification that their flights had been canceled would reach my family while they were either still in the air or just arriving at their connection airport. The shock and confusion would be immediate and intense, followed quickly by anger and accusations when they realized that I was responsible for the cancellation. But for the first time in months, I felt confident that I had made the right decision for my own well-being and for the long-term health of my family relationships. The vacation cancellation was a dramatic gesture, but it was also a necessary demonstration that manipulation and emotional games had consequences that extended far beyond financial compliance. As I settled into my apartment and prepared for the inevitable phone calls and confrontations that would follow, I reflected on everything I had learned about boundaries, family relationships, and personal autonomy during this difficult period. The vacation conflict had revealed fundamental problems in my family dynamics that extended far beyond financial expectations, and addressing those problems required more than polite conversation and gentle boundary setting. The decision to cancel their tickets while they were traveling to Cancun was extreme and would likely be seen as cruel by people who didn't understand the months of manipulation and pressure that had led to this moment. But it was also honest and decisive, a clear statement about acceptable behavior and the consequences of treating family members as financial resources rather than autonomous individuals. My family would need time to process what had happened and to understand that their approach to financial requests and family pressure had created a situation that made such dramatic action necessary. The immediate aftermath would be painful for everyone involved, but it might also create opportunities for more honest communication and healthier relationship patterns going forward. The months of conflict about vacation funding had taught me valuable lessons about standing up for myself and maintaining boundaries, even when doing so disappointed people I loved. The airport cancellation was the culmination of that learning process, a final demonstration that I was willing to protect my autonomy and dignity regardless of the emotional cost to family relationships. As evening approached and I waited for the inevitable phone calls from Cancun, I felt more confident in my own judgment and more committed to maintaining healthy boundaries than I had at any point during the entire vacation conflict. The decision to cancel their tickets had been difficult and would have lasting consequences, but it was also authentic and necessary for my own well-being and self-respect. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.